So, when we were planning this seminar on the state of the art of research in teacher education, we felt it would be very important to have an input from outside of the project, because we had already lots of discussions, we had already some common ideas, we had already some initial map of things, but would be certainly a great opportunity to have a sort of refreshment where everything can be put again into question, and look for the right person to do this job of introducing new ideas into our discussions. And so Professor Kari Smith was the person that we thought would be suited to make this role, and we invited her, and thank you very much that you were able to fit in our very tight schedule with lots of commitments this trip to Lisbon. Professor Kari Smith is well known in the field of teacher education. She is very much involved with early organization and the SIG in teacher education. Early just at the meeting last week in Munich, where Professor Kari Smith was very active. So she works in Norway. His career has developed in different countries, but has been in Norway for a while. And in Norway, she's a very active person as well in terms of reforming teacher education and producing changes. And in fact, as I understand, Professor Kari Smith is involved in initiatives in Norway that have some common points with what we are trying to do. So we look very much forward to your contributions. And I would like to mention that besides this academic and very involved professional activity, Professor Kari Smith is also a person with a very active life outside of the academic duties. Hiking, which is something in Norway that is very, very suited, because there's no shortage of mountains and places to walk around, and also involved in activities like swimming. So outdoor activities, which we also like very much in Portugal. I think our climate also is sort of inviting those kinds of activities. So combining these two aspects and going straight to the point, Professor Kari Smith, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here. And it is very difficult to say no to an invitation to Lisbon. Can you hear me without a mic? Because I'm not the type of person who can stand in front of something or just talk. I have to move around. So is it okay? I can do that. This is on. Will be on. And can you hear me? Good, fine. So I think this is better. And it's not me you shall look at, you shall look at this. Okay? Let's see. I have to put up a presentation maybe. That could be an idea. There you are. Okay. So I will be talking a bit about the state of art of research in teacher education, as you are talking about the event of here. And I'll be talking about the school in teacher education. And that is in fact the main message, because the message that I would like to get through to you today is here. And I can just leave that and go. I think we need to develop a theoretical and practical knowledge base of teacher education to create a professional education program for teacher educators. I got the hint. For teacher educators. And that is the message I want to send out. If I succeed in doing that, we will see. But what I mean is that in order to be a teacher educator, you have to learn, you have to be educated to be a teacher educator. And in my opinion, it is not enough to have a PhD in mathematics or in education, etc., to be a teacher educator. I believe that being a teacher educator is a profession, and you need professional education. It's like you can't be a math teacher just by knowing mathematics. You can't be an English teacher just by knowing English. If so, we don't need teacher education. So that is the message I want to send out to you. And these are the topics that I'll go through. First of all, I'll talk a bit about who are the teacher educators. Then I'll talk about what is the teacher educator's pedagogical content knowledge. This is Schulman's term that probably many of you are acquainted with. Then I'll talk about how to educate the teacher educators, before I finally move a bit into European perspectives, which have started beyond this project here. So if I start with who are the teacher educators? I suppose this is a rather common story, and many of you might probably recognize yourself. Education, this is my own story. School teacher in green, and some of the things within school teaching. You can see I was a school teacher for 20 years nearly. Taught in school and worked at the university at the same time as I taught in school, because I strongly believed at that time that if you want to have credibility as a teacher educator, you have to be fresh from the classroom. Because the students, they are much more likely to be open to listen to somebody who knows what they are talking about. And it was interesting, I just had on Monday, in between München early and another place on Tuesday. Monday I had a lecture to our own students in Norway in my teacher education program. And one of the feedback they said later on to the seminar leaders who are following up the professor's lectures said, finally with somebody who knew what the classroom is from the place of a teacher. So I think that is important. But I suppose this is a rather common story that many of you have been through. So who are the teacher educators? I think if we look at it in a broader perspective, the teacher educators are, and I start with, first of all, the higher education subject teachers. Those who teach mathematics at the university, history at the university, biology at the university. In our university, the students are doing a master's and a teacher education at the same time. So they get their master's in mathematics or in English or in history, and they are doing teacher education at the same time from the very beginning. So those who are teaching mathematics, and they have never thought they are teacher educators, in fact, they are teacher educators. They do not always like to be teacher educators, but they are teacher educators. Then you have those who teach the subject didactic teachers, those who teach how to teach mathematics. And outside Norway, outside Scandinavia, you might probably call these those who are teaching the subject methodology, okay? The methods of teaching English, the methods of teaching mathematics. They are teacher educators. And then you have those who are teaching general education, the pedagogues. However, I claim that teacher educators are also the peer students. I think they will always be teacher educators if they really work in a network. I think it will be the school coordinator receiving the students when they go into practice, because all teacher education program probably has some kind of practical component. And then you have the school mentors. These are what we in the literature call school-based teacher educators. It's the Dutch researcher Costa who started with this term. The school-based teacher educators. And I think that is an extremely important term to keep in mind, because we have to start looking at those people who receive our students in schools as teacher educators, and that is part of their job, and that I'll continue with. School principal, and then other teachers, and maybe also pupils, they are involved with forming the teacher to be when they are out there in practice. However, what I'll be talking about here are mainly these and mainly these. Okay? These are the groups that I'll be talking about here. So how do they become teacher educators? If you take these, those who are teaching the didactics, those who are teaching general education, those who are school-based teacher educators, how do they become teacher educators? And I think this is very common too. They might have a university degree in the subject matter, and then you're hooked in to become a teacher educator. You might have a university degree in education or in pedagogy, and it might be a master, it might be a PhD. You start at university. However, I think a lot of teacher educators, they are experienced teachers and they're headhunted into the teacher education programs. Not everybody who works in teacher education are researchers with a PhD degree. Probably many of them are headhunted. They are excellent teachers in the field and we would like them to teach. It's mainly the didactics of the subject matters that these people are teaching. Then you have teachers who are just being told to educate student teachers. For example, okay, a school receives a number of student teachers during their practicum. The principal comes up and says, okay, you have to take 2 student teachers, and that means you are told to be a teacher educator. So we have quite a variety of groups who have a direct impact on the students of teaching, and their formation and identity formation of becoming a teacher. They do have a direct impact on it, but it is not one type. So if we say, all these people, what kind of knowledge do they need to have? What is their pedagogical content knowledge? And this is something that we have started working on, trying to work out, trying to define. And we started off by looking at what do all teacher educators do? What are the commonalities of teacher educators? Everybody does it. First of all, they are working with adults. That means they have to have knowledge about adult learning. And that is not the same as having knowledge about children's learning. So if you take the school-based teacher educators who have just been told to take a teacher, what knowledge do they have about adult learning? Or you take the math professor at the university. You a math professor? Are you a math professor?
Yes.
Okay. What knowledge from your studies did you have about adult learning? You got it probably by working with adults.
And reading material?
And reading, okay, but no formal education. They have to know about teaching about teaching. They have to be capable or have knowledge about teaching. They are doing what they are teaching about. So that is a meta-knowledge. They have to be capable of preparing teachers to be for teaching children. In order to do that, they have to have knowledge about teaching children, about pupil learning. So they need more knowledge than what a teacher has to have. They are preparing for professional practice, so they have to have quite a bit of knowledge about teachers' professional practice. What does it mean to be a teacher in the classroom? And then they are conducting and teaching about that assessment. First of all, they are constantly assessing the students. Either they are in school or either they are at university. However, they are also teaching students how to assess students' learning or pupils' learning. So they have to know about assessment. So if we look at this a bit back, you can see that we can start by analyzing, we can start grasping and understanding the knowledge base of teacher educators. So the professional knowledge of teacher educators, based on what I say, is it theoretical? Is it knowing about? If so, what theories? That we don't know yet. That is still very undefined. Is it practical? If so, what skills and competences? Can teaching be put into a list of competences? That is something that we have to ask ourselves in the midst of the standardization and the standard waves that is creeping in over us. Okay, that was just to make my point quite clear. Is it research-based? Certainly it should be, but how? A research-based teacher education, is it as consumers of research, or is it as producers of knowledge and research? And if so, what kind of research? Is it practical-oriented research, or is it theoretical, positivistic research? Questions to be asked. We don't have the answers yet. This is still some of the work that has to be done before we can start talking about professional education for teacher educators. And then I'd like to think, because I think the teacher educator's main job is to make a link between the theory and practice. And that is tough. And I try to illustrate it like that. The theory is very often situated at the university. Here's where we have the theory with big T, with big T. In school, it's the practice. However, teacher educators, they have to constantly move between the university and the school and the university. They have to have a dialogue, they have to share, they have to build a bridge. But this bridge is rather frightening. The water under is very rough, and the bridge is shaking. And I feel very safe or on this spot or on the other spot. I just have to find, oh, that is not what I want. Okay. And I feel very safe at one of the sides, but I have to cross. It's not that easy to cross. So what happens very often, that the university teacher educators, they say, we are those who present the theory. And school teachers, who are the school-based teacher educators, they don't know how to do that. And then you have the practice field, up there at the Olympus, at the university. They are just talking about theory, they don't know what it is in school. Does it ring a bell? Do you hear this happening sometimes? Very often. The job of the teacher educators is to build a bridge like this. To build a bridge, and this is the bridge. I live on an island. So if the island is theory, call it theory. If the island is practice, call it practice. However, I have to cross this bridge every day. I don't even think of crossing it. That means I don't think I'm crossing it, because I am crossing it so naturally. It is safe, it's big, it's wide, etc., etc. I'm crossing it naturally. Until at a certain time, you might have, I have a tiny little car. I'm not good at parking, so I bought the smallest car in the world, so the accidents will be less. So that means when it's blowing, this is the Norwegian fjord. It's on the west coast. You have strong winds coming in from the North Sea, specifically now in the coming months, okay? Sometimes it's blowing here, and I'm worried. How am I going to cross from my island to the mainland? Because I know it will be shaky. Shall I do it or shall I not do it? And we will always be in a position like that, even though we trust our bridge, the bridge we have built, but sometimes it's good to hang on one side or the other. That is the main job of the teacher educators. They have to be capable of crossing the bridge, because when the students are there in the classroom and they are teaching, they don't say to themselves, this I learned in theory, and this I saw in school, and how am I going to combine it now when this sudden situation happens in my class? They just have to act. And that's it. So it goes all into one head, like when you're eating a meal. It all falls into one place. And if we look at the research here, we can also look at the work of Murray and May, when they are talking about primary expertise and secondary expertise. And teacher educators, as we have talked about, for many of them, their primary expertise is teaching, practical. That is their primary expertise. And then if they start working at a university, they also have to become researchers, because that is part of what they are being measured on if they want to improve. Publications, research. Then, so some of the teacher educators, as I said, they will have the primary expertise of being practical, others will have it theoretical. However, all this has to be done if you really want to be a good teacher educator, because you are doing both. You are doing both. You are teaching practically, and you have to know what you're teaching about, the theories. Okay? So we all have the same goal, and that is to educate new teachers. Then another thing that I'd like to move into, and that is the practical knowledge base of teacher educators. And here we are talking about professional practice. And what is the professional practice? The extent is to extend knowledge and skills within a practical environment. That is professional practice, to act on your knowledge within a practical environment. And what does it consist of? Integrity, respect, care, practice, disclosure, responsibility. Can you see this? Professional practice is very much about how you act with other people, how you interact with other people. In order to become professional, you have to have knowledge. But in order to have professional practice, it's how you depart with this knowledge and how you behave in your interaction with other people. That is what I want teacher educators to be. And then I would like to draw your attention to this model, which I built on a colleague of mine from Bergen. He's a priest, and he has a PhD in theology, and he became a professor in the Norwegian Defense Forces, where he did educational and now research, and now he is an education institute. Interesting person. He's talking about, and he's not the only one. You have, as I said, two types of knowledge, the theoretical knowledge and the practical skills. In order to be professional, any professional, also teacher educators, you have to have a solid base of theoretical knowledge and of practical skills. However, that goes into the space where you act with your professional autonomy. Because when you are there with your students at the university, or the student teachers or the pupils in class as a school-based teacher educators, you don't think, as I said, this I learned a theory and this I learned from practical. It all goes into your professional autonomy, and you make decisions. Because in any teaching situation, there will be situations that occur. You didn't plan for them. You didn't plan for them, and that I'll come back to because that's an important point. You have to react immediately. So what do? You do what Sean calls reflection in action. You analyze the situation, you try to decide, what am I going to do? I have to make a decision, and that very quickly. This all happens when you are there. So you analyze it and you make a decision. That decision that you make on how to act on the situation and how to handle situation, that is your professional wisdom, which is based, what you can also find in the literature, called phronesis. And it's based on the theory, episteme. It is based on the practical skills, techne. And this goes together with your experience into what we say, or we call, I call it practical wisdom. It's the same as phronesis. That is what teacher educators have to act. It is in this room. So what do I mean here when we are talking about their professional content knowledge? They cannot act here unless they have solid knowledge base, because they have to act here. And another thing that Brunstad said, he says, and I like that, you can do all the right things on a list. These are the standards for good teaching or good teacher education, without getting it right. It's just not there. You can get it right sometimes without doing the right things. And I think that is something that we have to keep in line. Teaching is contextualized, so that specific situation will always be a kind of unique situation. And to act, to have a list of how to act in this situation, I'm very worried about. So my professional practice, a homemade definition, cake, is doing the right things, which is the optimal thing. It's not the right in another situation. At the right time, in specific situations, and being able to explain why it was right. And that is for me the key word, to be able to explain why you did what you did. Not be good enough just to act because you had a gut feeling that this is what should be done. You have to say, I did it because. And then that explanation is what is going to be examined and judged by others. So it's not good enough. And there is something I think we are missing very often in teacher education, specifically with the school-based teacher educators, the mentors in school. They are not capable of articulating what they are doing. I just do it. Look at me, they tell their student teachers, instead of being capable of explaining what they are doing. So professional practice in teacher education, then, is to serve as a model educator. I think that if you want to be a teacher educator, you have to be a model educator in your interaction with people and in your knowledge base. I think you have to hold a disposition of critical inquiry to own practice and knowledge, to show and to be open about your reflective or critical reflection of your own knowledge and practice, and that of others. Don't just buy anything that somebody tells you. You have to be involved, I believe, in order to be a teacher educator, in conducting research. Even school-based teacher educators, I think, should be involved in conducting research. It could be practice-oriented research, action research, self-studies, but they have to be involved. I think it's a skill they have to learn. And they have to engage in ongoing professional learning. That is also a key point for me. That is that you realize that being a teacher or being a teacher educator is not to have a qualification and then you are done. I like some of you were in Ireland at the EU conference in Dublin. How many were you? I know you were there. Were you there, Michael? No. So you were the only one who were there? Could be? No, you were there also, Maria, right? Yeah, you were in Dublin at the EU conference? No, okay. You were there. Okay, good. There in Ireland today, they are talking about the 3 I's in teacher education. They are not talking about teacher education like we think. We think, including Norway, we think that teacher education is what you do before you get a certificate to become a teacher. There they are talking about teacher education as an umbrella concept, and they are talking about initial, what you do before you become a teacher, induction, the induction into teaching, which is a unique phase, and the in-service. And this is a political decision made in Ireland. It's a political decision that that is the way it shall be. Initial, induction, in-service, teacher education. Okay? It's a different view, but I think it's a healthy view, and I would like to see how this develops, because I think that is one of the challenges we have to look into. And then, one of the things that you are doing here, which I think that all teacher educators have to be involved with, that is engaging in professional dialogues. At the local level, in your own department, at the university, at the national level, and at the international level. Without the professional dialogues where we can learn from each other, little is achieved, I think, because then we become egocentric. And when you engage in a dialogue, I think we have to be very aware of the fact that we don't make a monologue out of it. That I say something and you agree, and we're exactly at the same spot. Or you say something and I agree. We want to be nice to each other. We want to be nice to each other. That doesn't take us any further. We have to challenge each other in a polite way, but push each other. Okay? Because then we become 1 and 1 becomes 3, and not 1 and 1 becomes 2. Because if we only state the same thing, each of us, and we just agree, then it's not a good dialogue. It has to go forward into a new place for all the participants, and we were not there when we started it. And I think that is what I mean by professional dialogues. So if we now have, more or less, a shared knowledge base, try to define it. We still have a long way to go. We still have a lot of research to go through. And we start beginning to develop a definition for celebrating professional practice, little by little. That was my previous slide. Can we then start talking about a pedagogy of teacher education? Pedagogy of teacher education, which can be taught? That is the question which I am very interested in exploring. And before I continue to see how and show you how we have tried to handle that in Norway, I'd like to take you a bit further into other discussions. It has been defined, a pedagogy of teacher education. John Lochran from Monash University is certainly one of them, together with Fred Korthagen, Tom Russell, Mikkel Lunenberg. All of them have been involved with it. And they are talking about the pedagogy of teacher education must go well beyond the simple delivery of information about teaching. Attention must be given to the content taught as well as the manner in which it is taught. And I talked to John about this, and I said, okay, how do you do it? He's the Dean of the Faculty of Education at the Monash University, but he's an experienced teacher and teacher educator. And one of the things that he's doing with a colleague, and he's written about this as well, is that he teaches the methodology or the didactics of science teaching. Okay? That is his topic in teacher education. And then he puts somebody, a colleague of him, in the audience, in the class. Okay? When he's teaching about science teaching. Okay? He's giving his lecture, he's talking, etc., etc. And then he has, it can be Maria sitting there at the back. Okay? I planted you there, Maria. Okay? And then her task is whenever I do something which might not be clear to the students, is to say, Kari, stop a minute. Why did you do that? In the middle of the lecture, why did you do that? Okay? Kari, are you sure that that's the right way to do it? In the middle of the lecture. So her job is to engage with me at the meta level when I'm teaching, because it's the content as well as the manner. And he's really putting that into practice. But that means that you have to feel confident and you have to feel trusted so you can do it. And that will come a bit better. I think it's a great idea. Then he's saying it's about the complex nature of teaching and of learning about teaching, illustrating how important teacher educators' professional knowledge, which I've tried to explain so far, how important it is and how that knowledge must be influence teacher training practices. And you see, I put training in so you don't see it that well as all the other things, because all the other things are very wise here. But I don't like teacher training. I'm not training teachers, I'm educating teachers. And to me, these are very clear. I educate people to act in their own way, with their own personality, with their own understanding of the profession. I'm not training them to do like all the others do. Do you understand the difference? So that I disagree with, but it's his quote, so no, I'll just push it in. Don't pay that much attention. Replace it with education. Then Schulman, he talks about a signature pedagogy. Very interesting term, signature pedagogy, and he had it now very briefly in early as well. It's a term he started to talk about in 2005, and I've been using it for quite a few years. What is a signature pedagogy? It's a teaching and learning model that is distinctive to a profession, and one that functions as a window into the priorities and very essence of the professor, how the profession works. That means, and he takes his example from the teaching of law in American universities. It really doesn't matter what university you go to in America. If you study law, you will study a case, and the students will discuss the case, not with each other, but with the professor. Okay? So it's not student-student interaction, it's student-professor discussing cases. That you'll find in nearly every law school. That he says is a signature pedagogy for law. Then he's talking about signature pedagogy for the medical, the practical component in medical education. And he says that is the case bed education. That the candidate students are standing around the patient's bed, discussing it over their head. It must be very frustrating if you are a patient sometimes to be talked about and not to. But that is what he says, that is very often what happens there. And he claims on and he says, novices, those who are going to enter the profession, they are instructed to think, to perform, and to act with professional integrity within that profession. Okay, can we link this to teacher education and how we see, do we have a signature pedagogy of teacher education which includes certain ways of how to think, how to perform, and how to act? And can we still find a balance and not fall into very long list of explicit competencies that has to be achieved? That is not an easy balance. When looking at this, I have looked at signature pedagogy. I think it is an interesting concept. And we can say it has a surface structure. That is, acts of teaching. That is, what do you do when you teach about a certain profession? How do you do it? That is the surface structure. What is the action of teaching? The second level is a deeper structure. And here is what theory is related to the kind of teaching you are doing. So that is a deeper structure. That is the why. Why do you do what you are doing? You can explain it. However, then there is an implicit structure. And the implicit structure is the moral perspective. What are your professional views? What is your professional identity? What are your professional beliefs, assumptions? That is a deeper structure related to it. You can look at how many of you are familiar with Van Manen's model of reflection? Okay, where he's talking very much about the same, right? He's talking about the technical, the descriptive level of reflection, but then he's talking about the affective level of reflection. That means, how do my actions, how do other people experience? How do they feel as a result of my actions? And then he's talking about the moral political level, which is the same as. When I look at this, I think that the surface structure, the acts of teaching, I think this is often known. This we can see. But the theory behind it, no, this is less known. And that is where our research really has to go, I think. And then the last one, do we talk about who we are, our beliefs as teacher educators, when you meet over a cup of coffee in the staff room, or do you talk about what you did? Do you talk about your belief, your values, your identities, who you are as a teacher educators? That is not what we talk most about. You can also see other models which relate to this, and that is Korthagen's onion model of reflections, etc. So you can see many things coming in saying more or less the same thing. Then the signature of pedagogy of teacher education. What do we know? I think we know more about the framework and the content we want, and I think we know less about the deeper things, the deeper structures. But, for example, we know that cases are good teaching tools in teacher education. Present the students with cases, let them discuss them, and find the solution. We know that students' practice experience are important. In Korthagen's work from 2001, when he's talking about realistic teacher education, start with the experience and then develop. We know that modeling good teaching is important, that teacher educators know a lot, learn a lot from that. Students learn a lot from modeling by teacher educators. And the articulation of tacit know-how. What I talked about. Being capable of explaining why you are doing what you are doing. And then we have to start researching practice, and that is Zeichner. However, one of the things here, which I think is a key word, and when you and your project are talking about research in teacher education, I think we shall be very, very aware of Zeichner's warning that it is not enough to research your own local context, describing your own local context, and doing good research which has no implications, no meaning outside your own context. And he says that is one of the problems with the practice-oriented research. That is that they do, many researchers do not succeed in lifting it out of their own context and link it to more general questions that teacher educations deal with nationally and internationally. That meta level, he says, is very often missing. And that is one of the problems why so often, for example in early, qualitative research is being criticized because it's too local. It doesn't go beyond. And that is because we do not see how does what happened in my context can it have relevance beyond. And that's at the discussion level and at the use of the literature. Then, one of the things that I think teacher education should, and that is what I would like to see the pedagogy of teacher education, that is spontaneous teaching. Detecting and exploiting teachable moments. I'll tell you what I mean. I can give you an example. For me to come here and give this keynote is fascinating. I love it. I've done a lot of preparation. I don't feel too excited before I give it because it's all planned. I control it. I know what I'm doing. I know what's coming. I control it. I studied it yesterday on my iPad on the plane. Know what I've done. Part of it I've given before, etc., etc. I know what I'm doing. It is pre-planned. It's not spontaneous. Some of it's spontaneous because that's the way I am. However, tomorrow I'm going to work with PhD students, and we are going to engage in a dialogue. There, I have no idea what questions I will get. Joanna, whatever questions, you don't have to tell me before. I have to act on what comes up in a moment. That is what we call. I'm involved with a large-scale research project in Norway where we are talking, it's called improvisation in teaching. Improvisation in teaching. It's a governmental funded, large, huge research project where we have got 6 years to work in a teacher education program, how to prepare our student teachers to be capable to do what we call teach well planned, but giving up and be more spontaneous. And it's interesting because we are working with yes players, one of Norway's most famous yes players, and then we are working with an American who is a drama professor, and they are teaching us about what improvisations mean. And then one of the basic things, for example, as this jazz musician says, he says that improvisation is spontaneity, which is not based on knowledge and good knowledge, theoretical and practical, is not good. So he doesn't say that we don't need it. You can't just get it there, but you have to be capable of getting out of your little frame and act more freely. And I think all of the both strategies, they require exploiting moments of, did I do anything? No, moments of contingency. And moments of contingency, they cannot be pre-planned. You can find it, Helen Timperley in New Zealand calls this adaptive teaching. Black and William call it in assessment using exploiting moments of continuous. Other people have called it teachable moments. And that is being capable of picking up, this is something that I have to exploit even though it's not in my plan. And we have to do that more in teacher education. Fred Korthagen's realistic teaching idea is based on that. No lectures, the students come with their practice experience and discuss them with the teacher educators, who then lift them to the theoretical level and get the theory from practice and not the practice from theory. They can only be well exploited by somebody with a high level of professional expertise and confidence. And we see them in dialogues with students because there the expert finds the links between theory and practice. So my question is, are we teacher educators prepared to do that? Do we have the guts to do that? To leave a well-prepared lecture about what we are doing, to go into the class and say, okay, today the topic is, for example, how to help all learners in my class learn better. You can keep in mind that I have watched this now in behind, but I don't say it. Okay, can you come with experience and so on and take it from there and lead them to an understanding of the zone of proximal development. That is things that I think we have to be more ready for. And then a new concept I would like, I'll speed up a bit. No, I still have 20 minutes? Yeah. Are you with me still? Are you okay? Okay. Then another concept I'd like to introduce, which I've stolen from another field completely, and that is a pedagogy of discomfort. So now I'm trying to explain what a signature pedagogy is. No pedagogy of discomfort. That is a pedagogy of uncertainty, ambiguity, and risk-taking. You never know if this is the right answer. And can you see how I link that to the model by Brunstad about professional autonomy, professional wisdom? You have to make a decision which is optimal there and then. And examples where it started off is very interesting. Sembolos and Bolla, they talked about it after 9/11, okay, in the States. And they talked about the discomfort that many American educators felt when they should talk about being humane, humanistic values, tolerance, open acceptance, and then they had a very strong pressure of patriotism after what happened at 9/11, okay? And they felt, many teachers, we don't know what to do. Whatever we are not comfortable with what we are doing, it really doesn't matter what we are doing. This was picked up and developed by British researchers who talked about teachers who were going to teach students how to write. And then they engaged in their own writing and presented it to students, even though none of them had been writers. We're talking about creative writing here, not about professional writing. And then they felt the risk of doing this. They felt discomfort because it's not exactly what we are doing. And when I talked about spontaneous teaching, can you see how little by little I moved to the fact that maybe teacher education, the signature pedagogy of teacher education, is a pedagogy of discomfort. And from here, I'll take you to the same work, which is about the discomfort. That is the work of Amanda Berry, earlier Monash University, now Leiden University in the Netherlands, where she's talking about teacher educators. Very often, they are standing, how much shall I tell the students, and how much shall I let them explore themselves? Right? Do you remember sometimes, gosh, I have to get the time, I don't have very much time, so I better just say it, lecture it, tell. Okay? Does that really facilitate growth? That is a question. The other one is confidence and uncertainty. Shall I come up and show that I know what I'm doing? Or shall I share with my students that I really don't know the answer? It's a tension. What is the right thing to do? There is not always a right thing to do. She's talking about the action and the intent. I'm working towards, that is the way I say, that we should integrate students in their own assessment. And then when I'm assessing the students' learning in my class, I give them a big exam at the end of the course. Okay, so here it's attention. Safety and challenge. Shall I always let the students feel that they are very safe on one plateau before they go on learning at a higher plateau? Or shall I just challenge them without them really knowing what they are doing? I'm involved, just very quickly about that, in another project in Norway, which is with the Faculty of Medicine, with the Faculty of Dentistry, Psychology, Faculty of Music. So we have cross faculties. And we are looking at professional behavior, other generics in professional behavior, which is not related to the various faculties. So what we do is that we put the students, and we do this in a practical setting, we put the students in a practice situation in very often in an old people's home, okay? And there they are getting 2 or 3 patients. And then together, the student from each faculty, they have to work out an activity plan for this specific patient. Using music and uses dentistry and music together, professionals, in order to give a more holistic treatment and support to people who are in need. Now we are trying, we will go in and we start doing it in schools also with disadvantaged children. And then we are evaluating, help students recognize the authority of their experience. This is important, you can learn from it. Or just taking the experience and tear it apart and say, okay, this was okay, this you have to do something more about. And then planning and being responsive, like I said in the very beginning. So Amanda Berry's work on tensions, I think it is important when we talk about the pedagogy of teacher education. So my conclusion on this is that the signature pedagogy of teacher education is in fact the pedagogy of discomfort. I think if you want to be good teacher educators, you cannot say that this is right and that is wrong. You constantly have to move within the tensions. It has to be a comfort. If it is not, I think you have stagnated. And then do something else. So, constant need to evaluate and to improve. And we will never reach the finish line. If I think I've completed, I know exactly what is right to do in teacher education, I think I've failed. I think I've failed. I want it to be a pedagogy of discomfort. It's tiring, it's tough. And this means we work in uncertainty, ambiguity, and need to take risks. And just to quote Professor Hannele Niemi from Finland, she's talking about enhancement evaluations. Evaluations that we do not to be judgmental, but constantly to look for things to become better. Helsinki University, they seem to know what they are doing in teacher education. So, a signature pedagogy, and here I will end with that, move on to other things, is, I think, has a macro level, what is decided for teacher education, and the framework at the national level. You have a meso level, which is what we believe in our institution is a good way to educate teachers. And it has, at personal level, what do I, Kari, believe? This is the way I'd like to work with my student teachers. And that is what Jack Whitehead from UK calls the living theory. Living theory. You are acting on your knowledge, and that is what he calls the living theory. So then, how to educate teacher educators? That is the next thing. And all teacher educators have the same goal, it's educating teachers. We know that teacher education has its own knowledge base. It's beyond current expertise knowledge. I think we can start talking about an emergent signature pedagogy of teacher education. And I believe it's a pedagogy of discomfort. So the policy recommendation for me is, for the politician, I'm not finished, I want to move into the Norwegian, I still have some time, you stop me. We need to develop systematic education programs for teacher educators at the post-disciplinary professional educator. So that means to be a teacher educator, your PhD is not enough. Unless it is a PhD in teacher education. Unless it is a PhD in teacher education. Do you understand what I mean? You are educated at the PhD level to become a PhD, to be a teacher educator. And now I'm going to give you two Norwegian examples. And here we are working on the edge, and that we are certainly doing, because we are trying to be innovative, to see things that we wouldn't have seen if we didn't dare move out on the edge and see beyond and what really is revealed when you get up and in the front. We have mentor education in Norway. We educate our school-based teacher educators. We educate them. And we have NAFOL, the National Research School in Teacher Education, which is a national doctoral school in teacher education. And I'll go through these things very briefly. When we are talking about the school-based teacher educators, the mentors, they fall between two sides of the bridge. They are school teachers, and their main responsibility is to the pupils. They are university-based teacher educators with their main responsibility. Now, here you have the university-based teacher educators, and their main responsibility is the students, university students. Mentors, they have responsibilities to both, to the pupils and the student teachers that come out into their school. So, how does mentoring differ from teaching then? Mentoring in the profession. You are mentoring people who are acting in the profession. You are mentoring adults, not children. You are mentoring maybe a future colleague. You are assessing colleagues' work. You have completely new, complex responsibilities. Thus, mentoring is not the same as teaching. I call it, it's a profession within a profession. It's a profession within a profession. That's the way I call it. So if it is a profession, we have to make sure that it gets professional education. And our goal is that all school-based teacher educators will be certified mentors. And the education we have is, at level 1, 15 ECTS credits, and they are assessed by portfolio assessment. They meet for 1 full year for 8 complete days. So they have 64 frontal or meeting hours in addition to their work in groups and in teams at home. That is only the level. They are educated to mentor student teachers who come from the university. The focus on level 2, and here they move into research because we want it to be even more developed, they are certified to mentor novice teachers during the induction. You cannot jump into level 2 if you don't have level 1. Okay? So it's successive. So we have really taken this up, and this is what we have at our university. And because the aim is that all our mentors, they shall be qualified teacher educators. And what we are trying to address, that in order to be a mentor, you have to have minimum 5 years of teaching experience and practicing teaching when you are receiving the student. You have to be recommended by the school principal with special focus on teaching competences, ethical behavior, and interpersonal intelligence. You have to have mentor education of minimum 30 ETCS. And there shall be internal and external assessment and qualification. We have an external assessor assessing our students' learning in addition to our own internal. Somebody come from another university. And they have to participate in a community of mentoring practice, professional community. So we are really trying to address this in Norway in order to make sure that the experiences they have in school shall be of quality and not by somebody who just do it because they're being told to do it. And then, for the last 5 minutes, I'll talk about the National Norwegian Research School in Teacher Education. Very quickly, this idea started in 2009. 2010, we were richly funded. The government just quoted like this. And we are richly funded by the government from until the end of 2016. We are taking up cohorts every year, so we have now taken up the last cohort. Yesterday in the board, I'm the head of the board, we decided to continue. That means to ask the government for more money because it has become such an enormous success. Why did we start it? Why did the idea come about? To respond to the criticism of the quality of teacher education, like in every country probably. To move teacher education away from the seminar tradition and up to the university or more academic level. To create a practice-oriented, research-based teacher education in Norway, our own knowledge-based teacher education. to increase number of teacher educators holding a doctorate, and to avoid a brain drain from teacher education. What happens is, if you do not have this, they take their PhD in the subject matter, they move out of teacher education into the subject matter faculties. That is what happens with our PhD students. Rings a bell? So how is it organized? And this is unique. I'm so proud of it. It's a partnership between 24 higher academic institutions in Norway. Out of 28 that we have, 24 work together. You succeeded with 2. We succeeded with 24. Each institution is represented in the advisory board, and we have a scientific leader, a professor, and an administrative staff. It's funded by the National Research Council, which has got money from the government. And this is the period. We planned on having 80 candidates, each cohort 20 candidates. Look at what has happened. Intake, 19 students. Intake, 20, 30, 42. People panicked. Is it going to end? We want to get in. It has become extremely influential on Norwegian teacher education, this program. What is the profile? We have 2 didactics, because we feel we don't want to have the brain drain. And we want to pull in those who are a subject specialist much more into teacher education, because we think there we need it. Then the teacher's mandate in society, understanding the teaching profession and professional development, which is more an overall goal. These are the 2 main scopes we have for our research. We are talking about preschool, elementary school, high school, so we are talking about all levels of schooling. So what are the activities and the benefits? We have 4 seminars. We are giving additional benefits beyond what they have in their own doctoral school at the university. Each of them are related to a doctoral school at their own university. Okay? What we are doing, we are giving more. Okay? That is the way you have to see what is presented. So we invite them and we pay for 4 seminars for each cohort every year over 3 days. We pay travel. Norway is big in terms of distances. We pay accommodation. In these seminars, they do 2 things. They meet international guest lecturers, Kari Smith, Helen Timperley, Lee Schulman, Biesta. We have brought some of the biggest. And they share each other's papers, discuss them, and, like we are doing tomorrow, and having another professor and their supervisor commenting on it. National and international NAFOL conferences. So we have had 3. We will have 1 next year, where we are talking about motivation for teaching. The general theme is, who wants to be a teacher? Keynote speakers come from Australia. We have 1-week seminar abroad for each cohort. That means at the end of the month, I'm taking 1 cohort, and I'll spend a week with the PhD students of Amsterdam University and Leuven University, where they present each other papers, discuss, create network, eat dinners together, have fun together, etc. And listen to prominent professors from each place. So do you understand how we help them? And that happens every year. They go to another country for a whole week. Financial support for internationalization. One of my students now is going to spend 3 months in Australia. We pay for it. Strengthen supervision. They get more supervision than only with the one they have at their own university. We offer PhD courses in methodology, academic writing, etc. And we give courses to supervisors. We invite supervisors to discuss how it is to be a supervisor of a PhD student and what can we learn from each other. So we do that as well. And then we have a lot of visiting researchers. Biesta is the one we have now. Paper presentations and work in progress, I said. So what is happening? And I'll end with this, okay? Is that okay? Or can I go very quickly? It's okay. So what is Nightfall? First of all, we want to educate the PhD students and not just to make them ready and to hand in a PhD. We want to give them an academic education to be a researcher at the PhD level. That is the goal of it, not just to present a piece of research. So we want them to become a member of the research community, and that is the first thing we work on, what it means to be a member of a research community. We want to help them qualify as an academic writer using theory, data analysis. That is a very strong focus of the second year. Third year, we want them to understand the importance of the practice theory dimension and discuss them in their research. So there we are working with the interpretation and discussion. Can you see their thesis growing as well? As you see this? And in the last one, they have to learn how to communicate research, the critical perspective, and contribution to new knowledge. So in fact, you can see a thesis here in that framework. But what we do in the last year is also that we invite foreign or Norwegian, Scandinavian professors to have, I call it a fake exam. Before they hand it in, they can present it to somebody else outside their own university, get feedback, and then work on that before they hand it in. So it's a way of trying to improve the quality. What is going here is, I'll read it, it's not too big. We want to help the students develop analytic competence. We want them to be involved in writing processes, to communicate research results. We want them to make a very strong understanding or create of the interplay between theory and practice. And this is what we would call, it's a knowledge horizon with meaning and coherence. So now I'll just go on to the concluding. The European, do I have time for the European? Okay, you're the head. So just to look very quickly at the European perspectives, then I start. I think teacher educators, are we professional defined groups? What is a profession? Clearly defined practical and theoretical knowledge space. Do we have it? Not completely. Systematic education, certification of professional practitioners, teacher educators, personal autonomy, I wish, maybe it's wishful thinking, but let's hope we still have it. Explicit ethical code, no. And priority serving others to personal economical gains. So if I look at these, which are the criteria for a profession, we are getting there. We don't have that. Don't have that. We are getting there, I hope we haven't lost it. We don't have an ethical code, and we all want our student to succeed, and that is the most important thing for us. So, I think internationally we have to acknowledge that teacher education is a distinct profession. I think we have to acknowledge that teacher educators need to be qualified as teacher educators. I think we have to learn more about the pedagogical content knowledge of teacher educators. We have to establish an international framework which allows for national and local differences, international networks, and you see that things are coming about. You have here in the US ATE, you have the organization of ATE, but these are organizations, these are not doing education. These are professional organizations. Mofet Israel and NAFL Norway, they are educating the teacher educators. That Mofet in Israel is a very interesting enterprise, which some of you would know. And then you have the Valon, where they are developing a knowledge base for teacher educators, which is worthwhile. So, my message hopefully is delivered. I think it is time to develop a theoretical and practical knowledge base of teacher education. to create a professional education program for teacher educators. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Kari Smith. That was certainly very inspiring. Lots of ideas, lots of provocations, lots of material to think about. So it was a very good input for our work. So you perhaps may want to have a seat. Now we have 20 minutes for a discussion. So I would invite everybody in the audience that wish to make questions, make some comments, please. And in fact, I would prefer to have several ends with a little bit of several questions, the first round of questions, and then if we have time, a second round of questions. I think that would be
But that means I have to write them down.
Sure.
A person my age has to write it down.
Okay.
List the questions. Okay.
So if the questions do not flow immediately, why don't we take 2 minutes to talk to your partner and have some initial reflection. We will have a little bit and then we will have the discussion. Looking at the time.
Yeah, I think that was a very
It was
good idea.
fantastic. Thank you so much. Very good. Very good.
That's a very good idea.
This discomfort was new for me.
Yeah.
I got to the signature,
I think, yeah, but it is.
got to the discomfort, so I'm still trying to.
But I think it is. To a large extent.
Yeah, it resonates. I have already before did some reflection about making discomfort, but I think that you are aiming at a stronger discomfort than what I was thinking. I have to think about. Thank you.
Okay. But can I take some more water? Can I just open the door? I think if you have an open buckle, let's continue with the open buckle. I think somebody's ready with questions already.
Okay, so the 2 minutes are up, and I have 3 people, 4, 5. I think that's great for a first round of questions. Okay, so your question first, please.
My name is Rosalia, University of Lower Silesia. The first part is about early commentary and saying thank you for, I would say, the range of subject of research still are not closed, this first thing. The second thing, thank you that you promoted us and convinced us that there are different schools of teacher education still most traditional one, which is maybe like a stone with a cross, and the newest one, which is not easy.
Excuse me, Rosalia, would you come up here to speak on the microphone? Because for the people that are seeing online.
And the new one, which is really needs our bravery to follow it. And this is very important for us to, as practitioners, to see it. How do you do it? What I am really impressed is the concept of your mentoring, because I think that this is the lack in Polish schools. And this is my questions coming. It has the ethical background. If our students go to school for practice, they meet the kind of supervisor, the teachers, practitioners. Very often happens that they do the research as ethnographic, participate in observation. They come back to universities and they show very hot spots of that kind of teaching, which is not the good one. But what is now in our practice, we have now the bridge to go back to those teachers who invited us to the class, and we've got the moral dilemma and the ethical dilemma. How to start the dialogue with the teachers who should have known about some parts of his work which is not the best one or could be developed. But you know we've got the borders. Because if the students were invited to the class, he has no power to say, dear teacher, there is a problem in what you do. And this is my question, how do you solve it before you go the mentoring system? Because now it's really easier to have the mentor who has 5 years of practice, then he develops the course, he's the expert. But before, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We will have 5 questions. So the next one, Manuela. Yes, it would be better because people listening online.
Thank you for your conference. I'm Manuela Esteves. I'm here. She's looking for me. From the University of Lisbon. I saw at a certain point of your presentation that you took competencies as in an equal plan with skills, and you spoke about practical knowledge, including skills and competencies. My question is, as I went following your conference, it seems to me that your notion of competency goes beyond practical knowledge, but I would like to hear you about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolina?
Good morning. We came up, I'm Carolina Pereira from the University of Lisbon, and we came up with 2 questions. The first one is about, you talked about supervision of supervisors. And we'd like to know a little bit more about the content knowledge of this supervision. What do you?
You're talking at the PhD level.
Yes. How do you do it? Second one was curiosity. When you showed the graphs of the model about the macro level and the micro level, it is the opposite of what we usually see. Usually the macro level is bigger and the micro level is the smallest circle. It was the opposite. Why was that?
Why the macro level was bigger than the micro level?
Was smaller.
The other way around. The national level was very small, and the personal level.
We go
Okay,
back
we'll
to
go
the
back
slide.
to that. Okay, okay, then I will discuss it. Okay, We'll have
Thank
a-
you.
Okay. And Nadia?
Thank you for your presentation. I want to ask you, when you speak on spontaneous teaching, I want to know if you analyze the conception that emerge in that spontaneous teaching.
In this,
Spontaneous teaching, what the role of conceptions, of beliefs? Thank you.
Nadia is a PhD student at the University of Lisbon. I also have a question myself. I think in the last 10, 15 years, perhaps a little more, there was some sort of shift in teacher education, both in pre-service and in service teacher education, emphasizing practice, sort of the practice turn. Apprenticeship models that began in the 90s. And then practice-based teacher education has become an important word in more recent years. My interpretation of your presentation was that you were emphasizing especially the connection of theory and practice and the bridge metaphor with all the dangers associated with this link. Now, thinking on pre-service teacher education, the prevalent model is to have more emphasis in practice by the end, if we mean actual practice in schools, teaching practice, either of other teachers or either of the new candidate, the teacher candidate. And also, looking at a more advanced level, we tend to sort of this connection between theory and practice, start with the theory, establish perhaps some connection, and at the very end, the emphasis is more on practice. So I would like you to comment on this and to make clear your perspective is that this connection between, or this bridge, or this interaction between theory and practice goes along all the process in some sort of stable way, or there are phases and turns and moments in which we emphasize one or the other?
Okay. Thank you for the questions. I think they are interesting, and I'll try to answer them one by one. I hope I've got down the main points, okay? The first question, you talked about how to, in a way, to prevent that our students will meet teachers who are not good teachers during their practicum in a way. And I think that what we are doing in terms of the mentor education, that is because that is what we wanted to prevent. But it didn't start just with the mentor education. It started by creating partner schools with much closer relationship with the university. So our students now go to schools which are called partner schools. We are now currently also working on having, but that is in the process of university schools, which will be our research schools as well, like a university hospital. But the partner schools means that we gave them free education of mentors, but they would have to take our students and to engage in a dialogue based on trust, where we could say, this we are happy with and this we are not happy with. So it started off with developing the trust, giving something. I made, as the Dean of Teacher Education in my university, I made a decision that I will meet with teachers in our partner schools every week, a whole day. So I went from school to school, I had seminars, I had lectures, talk about assessment, professional learning, etc., etc., etc. And that developed the trust. We stepped down from the Olympus. That is what, and our university is on a hill in the city. So we really stepped down, and that made it. But it isn't always easy. It isn't always easy because the mentors are decided on by the school principal, who will go, because they need the school principal's recommendation, as you said. And he decides who he wants to recommend and who he doesn't want to recommend. And so very often I have to take, or we have to take, the school principal and say, sit down, this doesn't work anymore. We are not happy, and we will not use you as a partner school unless this teacher is being replaced as a mentor. So that is the way we are doing it. If we see that general things, we take it up in the meetings that we have for the mentors. We have a network of all our mentors, and we meet with them in addition to the education, and then we discuss it there. But we really take that rather seriously. And I'll connect a bit to that, to what you said, your question as well. Did I give you an answer? Okay, thank you. Then we are moving on to the next one, and that was the question about skills and competences. And when I talked about competences, the question was, I talked a bit beyond only the practical skills. I make, and I'm not the only one, but I agree with those who make a clear difference between competencies and competence. Competencies, I think, is very often technical, and it's more related to skills. Competence is the overall, and that is you will act with competence within the model I had for when you have professional autonomy, and you have to use your professional wisdom. So competence is theory, it's skills, and it's the experience that develops a competence. A competence can never be measured. It can only be become evident. You can only see it when a certain situation triggers it. So competence for me is, as you said, suggested, it's much more than doing the right thing. Okay? Did I give you an answer? Certainly, a bit. That's what. Okay. Then you had the question about supervision of supervisors. We don't supervise our supervisors. We create meeting points. We bring in people who talk. For example, in Norway, in teacher education, we are moving away from monographies, from one piece of research, into a PhD by publication. So this is new, and many supervisors don't know how to do it. So we are bringing in people who have worked with this and talk about it. And then we set off in the seminars. We have day-long seminars. We bring them together one place in Norway. And then we have seminars where they talk to each other. They share, for example, how to create a relationship with a PhD student, how to give feedback when the PhD student is not open for feedback, etc., etc. So we are not supervising them. We are trying to engage in professional dialogue with them, learning. And that means that I, as a supervisor, I don't know more than other supervisors. So I can learn from them, and they can learn from me. So that is the way. So the supervision of supervisor is not the right concept. Okay? Then you had another question about the micro-macro level. And here we might have some disagreement. Let me see. If I made this mistake, then this is the model you're talking about. Yes. Okay, yes, good. Good, good, good. That is not what happens very often in many countries. And the more the accountability wave is moving into us, the micro level becomes smaller, and the macro level is the demanding one. I think, and I strongly believe, that the macro level shall only give us a very limited framework of what we have to do. Within that framework, we have to develop a profile of teacher education at the institution, at the University of Lisbon. That is our profile. So I don't go beyond. That means I don't go against the macro level, but I go beyond it. And then what really happens is what you are doing yourself and how you understand yourself as a teacher educator. And that will be how you act with your students. So again, it's based on the macro. It's based on what you're developing in your university. So I am not saying revolt, go against, have a revolution, But I don't like the fact that we have a top-down approach. We should more have an approach which centrally gives us a framework which is small enough, loose enough for people and professions and institutions to develop their own identity. And that is the same for me as teachers. Exactly the same as teachers. Those who tell teachers exactly what to do, they are removing the professionalism of teaching. And in my own research, I found that that is the main reasons why teachers are leaving teaching. So is that okay? Thank you for reminding me. Then we had the question on spontaneous teaching, the role of beliefs and values. Hi. What you see now is spontaneous teaching. What I'm doing now is spontaneous teaching. I had no idea what questions you would come with, okay? Of course, it is my beliefs, and as you have heard, I have clear beliefs and strong beliefs, which when you hear me next time, I might have changed them. I hope that I'm dynamic enough to change also when I get other input, but these are my status quo beliefs. It's based on who I am as a person. It's based on my values as a person, as a teacher educator. Yes, spontaneous teaching will be very personalized teaching. Other people will handle this completely different, the situation where I am at now, or in which I am at now. Other people would do that differently. Other people would be afraid, specifically maybe when I have to speak in a foreign language, etc. So there are many situations which will play in when you are doing it. So yes, I agree with you. Spontaneous teaching is to a large extent based on your professional competence. Going back again to your word on competence. Okay? So that is the way I would relate it. And then your last question, Mr. Dean. Yes, I think we have seen a strong movement, and we see a stronger and stronger movement, and I think we see the strongest in the UK, where they have moved 2/3 of their teacher education into schools. And when you talk to your British colleagues, you also hear them moan about it. I think that's the only word I can say, because they moan about it. And they are in a very bad situation, because they feel that teacher education is slipping out of higher education institutions. And the danger of doing that, first of all, I'll talk about the danger of doing that completely. I think it is that teachers will reproduce what is already in schools. New teachers will come to school, they will reproduce what is already in school because there's no theory or no new ideas coming in. So I think that is a serious problem. What they didn't do in England is to develop school-based teacher educators by educating them and to giving them time to take care of the students who come into the teaching. So that role of the mentors, that double role, I think that has to be taken much more seriously if you want to extend your practice knowledge component in teacher education. I think we really have to realize that being a mentor is a profession within a profession. And I think that has to be developed. Then you asked, you suggested that many teacher education programs, you start with a theory and then the practice comes in little by little by little by little, and the heaviest practice comes in towards the end. I think there are two things I'd like to relate to in my answer here. The first question is the obvious one, specifically if you talk about secondary school teachers. But in order to teach, you have to have something to teach. That means you have to have something to teach. That is, are you teaching mathematics? You have to know mathematics. So that is a natural follow-up of it. However, having said that, there's another thing, and then the question is, what is practice? Is it only when students meet and teach pupils, or is it otherwise? When I changed our teacher education program when I became the dean, I started with integrating teacher education and practice in the very first semester of their master program in English or in whatever, mathematics or whatever they did. However, in the very beginning, they just went out, and their task was to see how does the teacher behave in relation to the students. Because I wanted them to be capable of moving the hat from being students themselves to becoming teacher. But then they had to observe. Then they started helping out, little by little, in the next year. Then they started to take on some research project which the school wanted them to do in the third year. And then the increased practice started, and the longest practice period they do have at the end. And here therefore I don't totally buy Korthagen's point, if I understood him correctly, in realistic teacher education, that they shall out and teach students from the very beginning. I don't think you can do that to students out of ethical reasons. Students have the right to be taught by people who know what they're doing and the teaching. But what I do buy is that you create the theory about teaching out of the practice situation. So I could very well send them out there without any pedagogical or educational theoretical knowledge, and then to take how did you see the teacher behave with the students and develop the theory around their stories in teacher education. So that I could do, but not in terms of the subject matter, because there the students have the right to be taught by somebody who knows what they're talking about. Okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Kari Smith. We need to finish now because it's the time for the coffee break. We will be coming back a quarter to 12 to go with our program, and the coffee break is just outside? Just outside. So now 25 minutes, so 5 minutes less of coffee break, but we will try to start on time. Thank you very much.